Okay, so here we have some visual examples of how the mean and the median fall whenever we have symmetry versus skew. Starting with symmetric, if your data is basically symmetric, both your mean and your median should fall right in the center. So technically you could use either or, they should be about the same, but the mean is the preferred if it's available to use and if it makes sense. So we would choose that one over the median. Likely they're going to be very similar though. When you have left skew going on, what we can see here is that this mean is pulled down. It's pulled down by those few extremely low values, but look where it falls now. It falls down where these data values are getting very unlikely to actually happen. There's not very many of them. But the median sort of stays put. It stays here with a bulk of your data. It stays with the data values that are more typical. That's why we would prefer to use that in this kind of a situation. And similarly to that, the right skew does the same thing in the other direction. It pulls that mean up so that it falls above what the actual bulk of the data represents, and it makes it not really make sense anymore. We would prefer to stick with the median that sort of sticks with the main chunk of the data. You can also use the measurements of the mean and the median to sort of work backwards and determine whether a distribution is more likely to be symmetric or skewed. So perhaps you don't have any sort of a visual, but you do have those values calculated. If your mean is less than your median, then you know your distribution is left skewed. And the more low, like the lower that it is, but the mean is below the median, then the kind of more dramatic you know your skew is. If the mean is greater than your median, then your distribution's right skewed. And again, the farther away it really got pulled, then you would know you have more drastic right skew going on. If they're approximately equal, then you'll know your distribution is symmetric. You can also determine skewness or symmetry from a box plot. If your median line is nearly centered, either perfectly centered or at least nearly centered in the box, and the whiskers are approximately the same in length, then there is symmetry. However, if your median bar is not centered, or if one whisker is drastically longer than the other, then these can be indicators of skewness. So let's look at these images here. I'm going to start with the left skewed. What I want you to first draw your attention to is that the median line is definitely not centered inside the box, inside the IQR box. And when you have that, whatever the bigger side is the direction that your skew is going. So the left side of the box is larger there. That's indicating left skew. And then moreover, on top of that, our left whisker is also longer. So that is another kind of indicator that we have some drastic left skew happening here. I'm going to skip down to the right skew. Again, first place you should always look is the box and that median line. So again, definitely not centered. And in this case, the right side is larger. So that is indicating right skew. And moreover, the whisker is also longer, indicating some right skew. And then backing up to the symmetric version here, that median line is not completely perfectly centered, but it's very close. And the whiskers are not completely equally the same length, but they're pretty close. So both of these are indicating symmetry. If anything, what's going on here, the box itself is indicating a tiny bit maybe of left skew, but the right whisker is actually longer. So those things sort of balance each other out and cancel out, and we could say this is a pretty symmetric distribution. Now, I feel like they've left a few different pieces out here. So again, what I want to reiterate is that that median bar inside the box is where you want to look first. That takes precedent over the whisker length. So if we have a box plot where the median line is basically in the middle, but maybe one whisker is longer than the other, in a situation like this, I would still call this symmetric. Because what we might not see is we might not see that the only reason that left whisker is a little bit longer is maybe one of those data values, maybe that lowest data value was really an outlier. So probably what's going on here is that most of the data is perfectly symmetric, but there's one outlier. I would still want to label that as symmetric with an outlier. The whole data set is not, in fact, skewed. So look at that box as your number one indicator, and the whiskers is sort of a secondary. Now, when the whisker goes along with what's happening sort of right here, it's like it adds to it. This is most likely left skewed, either very, very drastically left skewed, or maybe a little bit left skewed also with an outlier or two. So they kind of, it amplifies what's going on. But really inside the box is where you want to focus your attention first off. So to finish up with this section, if the median is determined to be the best measure for your center, then the IQR, that interquartile range, should be your corresponding best measure of spread. So those two sort of go together. The median and the IQR can be coupled to go together well. I get it in the second sentence down here. It says these two measurements go together to tell you where the center of your data lies and also where the middle 50% of your data lies. So again, that is the box part of the box plot, right? That is kind of this middle part of these box plots. If I'm going to talk about the median as representing the center of my data, then I also use that measurement of IQR, that Q1 to Q3 measurement, whatever value I get there, to indicate the spread. And both of those measurements together will give you and will give your reader a good idea of how this data kind of looks and how it plays out. If you leave one of those out, then you're not getting a full picture. If I just talk about the median, that's nice to know where the basic center is, but I still don't know how far apart these data values are falling from each other. Same thing if I talk about how far apart they are from each other, but I don't get a reference point to where the center is, I'm sort of missing half of the conversation there. So coupling those, the median with the IQR, gives a full picture of what's going on.